the first poem that got me really started into poetry, which was it actually came in one of those forward mass emails, and it was a poem by Rumi that my mother read to me that said, the doctor said, take these pills, and so I took these pills. The doctor said, go ahead and cover yourself with sheepskin, and I covered myself with sheepskin. And then the doctor said, get rid of the sweet wine from the beloved's lips. And I said, it's time to say goodbye to the doctor. And I read, my mom read that poem to me when I was 12, and it really stuck with me, this idea of, I somehow got the idea that you could get drunk off of language and silence, so this idea of getting as drunk as possible through poetry, I guess, would be another one of my obsessions. And I mean poetry in the widest sense. I don't just mean it on the page, because I believe what we dream about is often a poem. The connections that people are making, the expressions that they're using in language, and I believe maybe the only difference between people that call themselves poets and people that don't is that some people take the time to write it and rewrite it, but I believe it's poetry is everywhere, and so more and more I see that happening. Yeah, my revision process, more and more I'm into it. I think that's like it's one of the funnest parts, because to me, revision is about being able to have the vision again. And so seeing different parts of the vision that I didn't necessarily see the first time around. And one of the quotes that Rilke says is to revise a poem. Well, it's not an exact quote, but he has this poem called Archaic Torso of Apollo, and it ends with the lines, there is no place that does not see you. You must change your life. And paraphrasing it awfully, what it ends up saying is that for that statue to take on that quality of that divine luminous quality, it wasn't enough for that person to be just imitating that on the surface. He had to get in touch with that feeling for that to come across in the stone. And that's like a good metaphor for how you can revise a poem, where it's often not enough to just revise it on the surface, but to really think about what are some of the things in my life that I have to challenge and revise to even be able to write the poem. But that sounds like a really heady explanation, but a really concrete example of it is how when I first started writing, I viewed I was worried that I would never really have an active sexuality because of a lot of self-prejudice of being in a wheelchair, and particularly in Mexico, where that's in some ways stronger. There are not that many people in wheelchairs in universities, for instance, or that have the access even physically to go. And so there was just a lot of fear there. And then I met a teacher from Indianapolis, Fran Quinn, who and I didn't want to be seen as a poet with a disability and categorized in that way. So as a result, I wasn't really writing about my wheelchair and resisting that. And he said, well, the thing is that, like it or not, your wheelchair is part of you, and it's part of you when you go on stage, and you seem to, and some of these poems are really beautiful, but you seem to be sort of hiding under them. And when I went down into my poems about the wheelchair, all that came out was that I still felt a lot of, beneath all those pretty words that I had put out in some of those first poems, what was underneath there was still a lot of fear and a lot of self-pity. And he said, well, why not think about your wheelchair as a source, as all these other things, which it already really was for me from the start, a source of joy and a way to play, but I wasn't really able to register that in my writing. I would just go into the self-pity mode whenever I talked about it. And so I had to revise my life to be able to write those new poems.